an actual Bayrod flannel.
What? That's epic. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been most of the legend stuff, because like I'm a chubby guy, or at least a regular American middle-aged guy, and like because all of the Legends actors are like gods and goddesses. We got all this wardrobe in the auctions, and it's like none of this fits me, man. But this one, a different person got, and Gabrielle.
Yes.
Yeah, Gabrielle won this in one of her auction lots, and it was an extra large, and I'm just like, that's actually Legends clothes that I might fit into. Like,
oh,
can I buy that off you? And she's like, totally. Here's your friends and family discount.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's the hard thing too. Is it's like I'd love to like own actual clothing to wear, because that's why I'm typically not big on buying like props from shows, because I'm like, I want to wear it, or if I have someplace specific to display one or two things, fine. But past that, I'm just gonna have a bunch of stuff that it'll become junk, even though I don't want it to be. So it'd be really cool to have stuff. But yeah, like I am nowhere near like the tiny. There's no way anything will fit me.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually I can't show you without flipping the camera on it, but behind my monitor is I have a shadow box with one of the Zari flannels from Here I Go Again.
Nice.
It's like her acting double.
That's
so it's
perfect.
not one Tala wore, but it's like actually used in the production of that episode. And I, unrelated to having bought the shirt, I had a signed picture from Tala on my wall that's from that episode wearing the flannel. And so I put that inside of the shadow box with the shirt, and I've got a nice little, like, that's my little Legends display behind my desk.
Yeah, I love that. Well, hopefully you'll be able to add your new book soon, because so those of you guys just tuning in, hi, welcome to Nerdy Neighborhood. This is going to be less structured than I try to do, because we're talking about Legend of Tomorrow stuff. And Russ, as many of you Legends fans probably already know, he's an entertainment journalist. He's been in the 20 plus years doing just this crazy stuff. He gets all this behind the scenes stuff. He's really great at what he does. But he is the writer of the book Time to Be Heroes, a totally unofficial oral history of DC's Legend of Tomorrow. But we're going to call it Time to Be Heroes for short. So we've been talking about a lot of stuff tonight, like even before we started recording. But we're really going to focus on this. And then, of course, you guys sent some questions in on Twitter, which is cool. So I'll make sure to get to those. So if you send them in, we'll answer them. But yeah, otherwise, Russ, thank you again for being here. And again, I'm really excited, because you're going to have to put your own book on a wall somehow. Like, you're going to have to get a shelf or something.
Well, it's funny. I still haven't done that yet with the Josie book. But my dad has. I wrote my first book in 2021. It was an oral history of the 2001 Josie and the Pussycats movie. And my dad has a little rack. It has it on display in his house.
That's awesome.
So, which is also funny, because I'm technically Russell Burlingame the third. And so if people go to my dad's house and it's on display, they're like, did you write a book about Josie and the Pussycats? It's like, no, that's the other Russ, a different guy.
I was gonna say, at least he's like, he doesn't get like embarrassing. He's like, crud, I'm just gonna put that away and then only show like the people that I want to show it to. Like, that's my son.
No, my dad's totally. It's funny. My folks split up when I was a kid, and so like I was the only one who ended up at my dad's house in high school. Because I really, really did not like where I had grown up.
Gotcha.
And so it was like, oh, new school district? Yeah, I'm going. But as a result, I have a really great relationship with both of my parents, because I always had a good relationship with my mom. My dad was a little distant because he's like a workaholic. But then once I was the only person in the house with him, it's like, we had these things called CEDs, right? It was... Before a VCR came into our house, there were these giant plastic discs that you had to flip over the movie halfway through. And my dad had like 400 of them. And so most of my great memories from high school are like sitting around with my dad watching like Rocky and The African Queen and like basically movies made before I was born on this format that is one of the worst home video formats ever made.
I was gonna say it's hard to beat the VHS, even though like I'm nostalgic about VHS, but God, is an inconvenient format. Like it's very odd.
This one, the thing about CEDs is that it's a record. Like it's inside of this little plastic jacket. It's a record.
Yeah.
And so, like a record, eventually it will wear and skip. And so, a lot of my favorite movies when I was a kid, I would miss like 20 seconds here and a minute there because they just skipped basically all the time.
Oh, thank you, Mom. She just brought me my medicine out of nowhere.
Oh, there you go.
But yeah, no, I totally get that. I have records. And so when you're describing it, because I've actually never used that format. So there you go. I'm young enough to say I've never used that one.
Well,
but I was like, it sounds like a vinyl. I was like, why is he saying this instead of vinyl?
Yeah. Most of even people who are like my age and older, most people never used that format. It only lasted for like 5 years. And in fact, it was such a spectacular failure that it killed RCA.
My goodness.
And there's actually a book about the video disc and how it collapsed RCA's development. And it was like, it's some of it is technical stuff, but I think it's an economics textbook because like most of it is just like, how did they screw it up this badly?
That makes a ton of sense. Well, they definitely did not listen to the legends to screw things up for the better. They made it worse. So that is super unfortunate. But, I'm really excited about this Kickstarter because I definitely knew that this was coming soon. So when I saw it and, your goal started out with $1,000, which is a solid, pretty, stable, low ball goal. And you're already at 7,666. So you got the 666 there too.
There you go. And that also means I've made like $100 while you and I have been shooting the shit because I was at 75 something before we got on the phone.
And we can watch it go up further as we talk.
I think there was 129 backers when I tweeted about it right before we started talking. Now it's 131.
Thank you to those two other people.
Yeah, and it's really cool and it's great to see like the support come out. And one of the things, like my personal like brain target for success is that I want this I want to sell more copies / make more money than the Josie book did because obviously you in a perfect world want to do better than you did 2 years ago. But like right now between people buying like bundles of books and stuff like that, it's pacing way ahead of Josie just by virtue of like the average person is spending like I have half as many customers as I had for Josie, but the average person is spending an extra like $15. So but yeah, I set out this like really complex, elaborate budget where it's like if I do X, I can do Y. If I make X, and it's like in a perfect world, I wanna get to like 12,500 because that's gonna allow me to do like an audiobook and a bunch of extra crap that I did for Josie eventually, but it took time and it took a second campaign and all this kind of stuff. But like the thing I was telling you off mic is that one nice thing, like I'm working a day job and for obvious reasons, when you're working your day job, you can't be taking all of your time away to like manage a crowdfunding campaign.
Right.
But managing a crowdfunding campaign is kind of a full-time job. And so it's nice that on days when I can't pay attention, I can't be there answering questions and making updates and all this kind of stuff. It's still like there's still enough enthusiasm for Legends that people are just finding it via search, and then like it's making like $200 a day without me doing anything. And so like, that's really nice because it's like there's people who want to support me and there's people who I can sell on the book, but also there seems to be just a baseline level of people who are so enthusiastic about Legends that without any context they're seeing it and being like, okay, sign me up.
Yes. And I was so excited when you told me that earlier too, because it's just like, just by existing, Legends makes money. And so I feel like that's just something that, some of the other fans, are also really big on is like, guys, why why are we not getting more content, or why is it not even getting planned in the next year, the couple years? Because just by existing, this is proof that people want Legends, and it keeps growing. Like you said, like we just sat here watching like 2 more backers pop in, and you know, you don't need crazy numbers of like, you know, 1,000 backers to show that, hey, like this is something people are willing to just fork over money the second they see it. Like whether they know your work, right? Or even if there's like, hey, I don't know this guy that well yet, but he's writing a book about Legends, instant money. Here's an extra $15.
I will say I was like, I hadn't looked at my backer report yet because part of me is just like, I don't want to think about the money side. Like, as long as it's not stalling out and selling 0 copies today, I don't want to think about the money side. But I did look at the backer report today and realized that, like, there's a lot of people on there. There's more people on there this time, I think, than there was with Josie, who I just don't know who the hell they are. I've never talked to them on Twitter. They're not my friends. Like, with the Josie book, there were a lot of people, obviously, that I didn't know because I pre-sold 300 copies of that book. But at the same time, like, especially in the first 3-4 days, it was like, oh, look, there's my mom, there's my friend from work, you know. I will say there's something really nice about selling a book like this and having in the first 24 hours Mark Guggenheim buy a copy.
That's pretty darn cool to have one of the biggest producers of, you know, not even just that show, but the Arrowverse, like, basically say, cool, I want it.
And he's been super supportive. And it's funny because, like, one of the things I was saying on Twitter the other day is, like, not only has been supportive of this book, but also, like, in the time that I've known him, which is basically 10 years at this point, he's always been genuinely excited about the Arrowverse, genuinely excited about Legends. Like, there is a difference as like, I've been covering the entertainment space for 20 plus years. There's a difference between people whose enthusiasm is manufactured because, like, their paycheck depends on it. Like, you can tell, like, the reason I'm excited about this movie is because it's my next movie, versus people who are excited about a thing because they're like, no, I'm really passionate about this thing and I want to see this thing, you know?
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I do want to ask, though, just because you bring up the subject, and I saw that article that went around a while ago regarding some thoughts he had about, I guess, not having work after the Arrowverse or something like that. Like, you know, how do you feel about that in terms of, you know, because you're sharing these great, like, anecdotes about, like, he's super excited about this book. You've interviewed him for the book. You've known him so long, which is phenomenal. And yet there are articles coming out with him saying, like, well, now I can't get work for the Arrowverse. So, like, was it even worth it? Like,
well, I will say, first of all, that there's a lot of context that's missing from almost every one of those articles. Like, if you read the original blog post, first of all, he starts off with the, this is what I was going to say, but I thought better of it. And then he shares this whole thing about how frustrating it is to have spent 10 years building this giant thing that made a lot of money and, you know, brought them in a lot of credibility. And then, like, when you reboot the DC universe and bring in James Gunn, that Berlanti and Guggenheim didn't, like, get a meeting. And so, like, he said, like, on a career level, it feels like I've wasted time.
Yeah.
But, like, first of all, it's key to say, like, he frames this as, like, this is where my head was at 3 days ago. This is what I wanted to write. This is not how I feel right now, you know? And secondly, even if he did feel that way, like, the fact that he frames it with completely career-wise, that it doesn't feel worthwhile. Because I know that he, as a person and as an artist, is really proud of what they built, and he's really happy about the fan community that they built around this. It's funny, I was talking to him a while ago, and, like, I don't think he would mind me saying this. I was talking to him about 2-3 months ago, and he was not in the best headspace because like, work stuff was really hard. And I said to him, this was shortly before he actually made that post, but I said to him, like, you know, I'm doing this Legends book, and I can tell you right now that whatever frustrations you're having, if you retired tomorrow, you've brought so much positivity and so much joy into the world that you did better, before you retired than most people are going to do in their career.
Absolutely.
And he was really appreciative of that. And he was like, one of the things he said is that he was really looking forward to like reading this book and seeing some of the ways that like the fandom talks about the show, and talks about what it is that connected with them and what it is that is so important to them. And so it is a bummer that somebody whose work I like and who I like as a person has been really frustrated with some of the elements of the Arrowverse. But I also think that those reports were kind of overblown. It's like you take the most sensational quote, even though in the context of the blog post, he's saying this was the quote. This quote is from a few days ago when I was at a really low point, and it's not representative of what I think now. But now, a month later, because that's the other thing. This was a February 10th blog post. For some reason, it took forever for people to notice it.
Yeah, that is weird.
But because I read it the day of, and I sent him a text that was just like, "Hey, you doing okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm good."
Yeah.
But a month later, suddenly it went viral. I think Deadline or somebody found it and ran something with it.
Yeah, but I think CBR caught a hold of it. I think that's the one I saw.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people ran with it, but yeah, it is frustrating. Like, it's a bummer that at any time he felt that way, because like obviously you want these people to be as fulfilled creatively and as fulfilled artistically as like we are as audiences watching the thing. But also I think that most of the coverage has been kind of bad coverage from a reporting standpoint, because it's not reading the post in good faith. And it's like you're making a lot of these things where it's like, let's take the most sensational quote and kind of pull it out of context. And it's easy to kind of hand wave things and be like, oh, that's out of context. But like in the context of a blog post where he literally says like, this is what I almost wrote, this is not how I feel, then to lead with a headline that's like, this is how he feels. It's like, that's not what that said.
No, that makes a ton of sense. And, context is everything. And I really loved how you really focused on, kind of what you shared with him, it sounded like, which is, hey, there's so much positivity in the fandom and what you've done is great. And the fact that seemed to help him realize, hey, you're absolutely right. Like, that's exactly what I should focus on. That's what I want to. And like, I wonder, because one of the questions I had for you is just with the name, a time to be heroes. Like this name, I feel like could be used in so many different ways. It could be a call to action. It could be just like, yeah, the heroes, whatever. But like, where'd you kind of get this name for the book?
I blame Morgan Faust. She was actually one of the first people I interviewed, and I told her, hey, my working title is a line that you wrote, because this is actually from Too Legit to Quit. If you remember there's a point where Zari 2.0 has finally kind of figured out her life and what she wants to do and how she wants to like serve other people and not be about herself.
Yeah.
It all gets taken away because she's being forced into retirement. And she said, I thought there was going to be more time. And I can't remember who she's talking to in the scene, but somebody says, more time for what? And she said, more time to be heroes.
Yeah.
And immediately I was like, that's a great title for a book about time traveling superheroes. And it also kind of reflects one of my favorite things about Legends on a macro level, which is, and I talked to Phil Klemmer about this when I talked to him for the finale, which is without meaning to, because obviously they didn't know it was the finale when they wrote it, but without meaning to, they actually created a really great bookend effect, because the big twist in the pilot was when Rip tells them, you're not Legends, you're nothing, people don't remember you, and if you die on this mission, everything's fine. And then fast forward to the Fixed Point and to Too Legit to Quit, and or not Too Legit to Quit, in Knocked Down, Knocked Up, all the people in that bar and then Booster all know them like by name and by reputation.
Yeah.
And it's like Booster Gold, who's from 500 years from now, knows who these people are by name, can rattle off trivia about them. These are the people who were completely forgotten by history before they got on that ship. And so, without meaning to, they created this really beautiful bookend of, like, you know, I think it's Sarah in that first episode that says, like, okay, well, screw it. Like, even if it's a lie, we're going to become legends. We're going to do the thing. And, like, the last episode showed that, no, they did that thing. Like, they literally, by force of will, made themselves relevant to the history of the universe.
I love that. And that's a great point that I didn't sit on the significance of, because there were 20 other things going on at the time and in the episode itself. And, you know, there's so many things, but you're absolutely right. Like, and honestly, I'll be very honest, the episode, what was it, the one before that where they go into retirement, that scared the living hell out of me as a fan, because I was like, no. Like, I am not ready for you to wrap up just like this. Like, with 2 episodes, we had, like, if they had told me at the start of that season that was the last season, right? And I feel like it would still stink, but I'd be more prepared for that. But then that just happened. I was like, oh no, like, I can't do this. But so I think and I honestly think in their minds, they were, whether they got another season or not at the time, I think they were getting close to the end. I really do. In terms of, you know, they maybe would have had 1, maybe 2 more seasons, as much as I wish they would go on forever. They were getting to a point where I was like, it's time to wrap it up. Particularly, I think, because, I mean, the only one that's left from the originals are Gideon and Sarah. And I would argue that Sarah's the character that you really need to wrap up the most. And she was this close to wrapping up. I mean, obviously, I want time to see their kid and everything, but she was literally this close. And once you wrap her up, you put, you know, you put Spooner and Astra as the co-captains and you get off.
and that's the thing of it is, too, that in the early days, they always used to say, like, we're going to get to this point where we just rotate cast in and out, and you're never going to have a static group of legends. And for a while, that wasn't really true. And recently, actually, when I talked to Phil, he was like, I don't know why we said that. We never really, like, we didn't want to get rid of Sarah. We didn't want to get rid of, you know. And so, but it became true over time. And so when you get to the point where it's like, there's this constant turnover, there's this constant evolving community. It's like, once you wrap up Sarah's story, it's nice to wrap up the stories of other people, but it's reasonable to assume that the Wave Rider is going to keep existing as the Wave Rider has existed for the last, 7 years. It's like, the next couple of people are going to take over as captain. They're going to keep doing their thing. New people are going to come and go, you know? And it's like, that's true also to an extent about this cliffhanger to me. It's like, it would be nice to see an official ending to the cliffhanger, but at the same time, like, you can pretty much in your head figure out what's going to happen with the legends. Like, you know that it's not like they're going to go to jail and stay there. Not even least of which because we've already seen the comic that's ostensibly canon where Sarah is out in 20 years talking about her kid and having drinks with Mick, you know? Yeah. But the thing about the ending, I talked to Kevin Mock about it. I talked to Phil about it, and I talked to Kato about it. And Kato, of course, is very much like she's ready to fall on the sword. She's like, everybody blame me. Like, it's, you know, it was my call. Yeah. And that's fair. And as a showrunner, I think a lot of people want her to do that and want somebody to point at and be like, it was you who did this. But a thing that Kevin Mock said that I thought was really interesting is, because he was the producing director. He was there for every episode. He helped the episodic directors kind of get a sense for the show. And obviously he also directed a bunch of episodes. He directed Bebo the God of War. Yeah. He directed A-World. He directed the finale. And when I was talking to Phil about it, he said, you know, Kato took the hit for that, but really she wasn't given a good choice. Because by the time they came to us and said, you know, you're not renewed, the episode had been written. And so your two choices were shoot it as written or try to modify it on the fly and wrap things up kind of artificially. And so the thing was that at some point they made the decision, are we going to be safe or are we going to be legends? And they basically decided, let's let legends be legends right up until the last moment. And if that's the last moment, then we didn't compromise and we made the show we wanted to make.
Yeah. And I think as a fan, like, of course, it's like it stinks to end on cliffhanger, but I would rather them go out as legends. And that fits the show too, right? I mean, how many times have they done that where they said, yeah, we could play it safe. We could go home, or we could, actually do this or that. But you know what? We're legends. We're not going anywhere. Like legends never die. Like, when did we ever go quietly? So I think that was completely the right call. And I don't think honestly, I've been pretty proud of the fandom, because even when Keto did come out and take the blame, as you said, fall on the sword, I didn't see anybody. I'm sure there were still a couple people, but I didn't see anybody jump up and be like, "Ha, we can blame you." Because there's no reason.
Those people are all on Reddit.
That's why I don't go on Reddit, because it's a dark, horrible place.
I will say, in fairness, the Legend subreddit is more positive than most subreddits, but I'm always talking about how much I love this fandom and how embraced I've felt ever since I came out as a public fan of the show and was like, hey guys, I'm doing a thing. And I always talk about how great this fandom is. And then you go to Reddit and you'll say something about Bebo and you get brigaded by people who are like, the show sucked after the Legion of Doom left. And it's like,
okay, Arrow fans, go watch Arrow again. That's fine. But
yeah, and it's just the weirdest thing. And there's two very distinct camps on Reddit of people who just snipe at each other all the time. And it's the people who liked the first two seasons, and then the people who liked it after it went off the rails. And I'm a weirdo because I'm on record as having liked the whole show. For a while, because I wrote a really nice review of the pilot, and everybody hated it. And so for a while, I was the only reporter who was being quoted on the Legends of Tomorrow Reddit page, because it was, or not Reddit page, Wikipedia page, because it was that those were the 3 positive quotes you could find from a big outlet.
That is something. And that is hard to do. That's what's interesting. So I watched Legends from the start. I started with season 1 and then kept going. And it's so funny because I didn't think the show was that awful when I first I didn't think the first season was that bad until it became 18 or however many episodes, 20 episodes of Vandal Savage not ending. It was man, if this were a 10 episode first season, it wouldn't be the best thing ever, but it was right, and then season 2, I don't think was all that awful, but was definitely still conventional, still playing it safe, but loosening up enough to be hey, this is gonna get you another season.
you can definitely see it. You can definitely see it starting to take the training wheels off and become legends at points in season 2. I've told this story a bunch of times, but not even at that point, 5-6 years ago, the CW was still sending out physical screener DVDs for things. And so I was supposed to be interviewing somebody, I don't remember who, for Raiders of the Lost Ark, the George Lucas episode. And so they sent me a DVD of it, and I took a picture of the DVD and I sent a text to Mark Guggenheim, and I was like, hey, look what I got. And he texted me back you have to tell me what you think right after, because I think we've either figured out what the show's going to be or we're burning every bridge in sight. And when you watch that episode in kind of hindsight, it is it's the proto version of what Legends became.
Yeah.
It's off the rails. It's still kind of dark, but the idea of Ray and Nate lose their powers / what makes them because they didn't get to watch Star Wars and Indiana Jones. Fun, dopey, charming idea. And the idea of them being in the trash compactor with George Lucas is such a that's so far over the top. That's so many steps beyond anything you'd ever see on Arrow.
It went so like meta essentially. Like you're definitely right there. There's those stepping stones, and I don't know, like even though that's not an episode I think often of, like every time people bring it up in like stories like you just told, I'm like, you know what? Like that episode really does stand out though when you mention it, because that was the charming part about the episode. Like the rest of the episode to me, the other aspects of it were whatever. But the fact that you're absolutely right, it's like, wow, they lost who they were because they have Star Wars and Indiana Jones, but they got them back and they're complete. It's like, you know, it's like how fans feel about their shows, like how we might feel without Legends. It's like, give us our show back so we have our identities, you know? Like,
well, no, it's also funny because like that was the first time, because in the first season and in the second season to an extent, they had a lot more hard and fast time travel rules.
Yeah, they did.
And you could track it really easily in most cases. And the George Lucas episode where they're basically just like hyping him up to where he's like, I'm gonna go to film school, and then everything is magically fixed. It's the first time the show ever did like Bill and Ted logic.
Yes.
And the Bill and Ted logic is what completely shaped season 7, where it's like, okay, everything's fucked up now, but it's okay because Ava's keeping a list, and when we're done, we're gonna fix the list.
And then that's one thing that's kind of sad is like, we didn't get to really see her like go back to and look at the list and be like, oh my god, guys, the list.
We get the next season would have just been My Name is Earl, but with time travel.
That could be a cute like that could be like a plot for like a future like next season, obviously, or like the film is like bring them back together and it's like, guys, we have to come back here one more time, even though like, you know, Ava just gave birth like a month ago and she's already like, guys, list, we didn't do it, and like they have to get the gang. Yeah, like that would be fun, but yeah, that shit's hilarious.
But yeah, like and the other one I point to from season 2 is just the finale, because like the idea of the Reverse Flash being like, okay, screw it, I'll do it myself, but instead of like I'll do it myself being like what a sane person would think I do it myself is, he's just like, I'm going to go back in time every 4 seconds, grab that guy and bring him here until I have an infinite number of myself. And like, I remember going to my shrink the day after I'd watched that screener before the show had even aired. I'm like, you have to watch this show. It's completely off the rails, and I think that I love it.
Yeah, I remember one point too. Like I had a different therapist years ago, but it came to a point where life was pretty good, but I still would go every once in a while to check in, and you know, I always make appointments if I can to to have something. But I remember I often would just end up going to her for a while, and I would just talk about Legends, and she would just like humor the heck out of it, and she was completely fine just like listening and asking questions. And I was just like, I have somebody else that'll listen to me about Legends. Perfect. I will happily pay.
But yeah, that's so it's I feel that, and also like I said, I feel like season 2, I think it's funny because it's much more of a transition than I think people think of it as. And so the people who are like, oh well, the show was totally different back when we had Legion of Doom, and it was better because it was more like Arrow or whatever. It's like, you do realize that like by the time the Legion of Doom were gone, Damian was already a joke character, and Reverse Flash was doing like increasingly unhinged things. like it was never it wasn't Arrow past like 204, guys. Like that's
no, I mean, I definitely agree with that. Yeah, definitely wasn't where Legends has gone to, obviously, but I mean, and I love that finale. Like the season 2 finale is probably it's up there for my favorite finale. It's not gonna be my favorite. I think the season 7 finale, not series. I think that finale is my favorite at this point, but season 2 finale is so important to me because of how much I love Sarah and how big of a moment that was for her. Like that was absolutely huge. The way, you know, she had the full opportunity to, you know, bring her sister back, bring Laurel back, and I'm bawling my eyes out too. And, you know, she even gets to see her again, and she still makes the choice to just be like, nope, just get rid of this spirit. I was like, dear God, if she isn't captain next season, I'm going to lose my mind. Like, if she does not stay captain forever, I will throw hands.
It's also funny because like it's got that Legends formula of like, you have these great powerful character moments juxtaposed with some ridiculousness, because like on paper, what is the log line for that episode? It's they need to recruit J.R.R. Tolkien to find the blood of Christ so that they can destroy the Spear of Destiny before a zombie Flash comes. It's like,
yep.
It's like on paper, that's even just on paper, that's unhinged. Before you start to watch the weirder stuff unfold, you're just like, how is that a plot synopsis?
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like you can just do you can make even silly TikToks of just reading out synopses for Legends episodes, and people are just like, what the hell is that? Because that just cracked the hell out of me, because you're completely right. It's like, wow, this is such a important season finale, but you just read that. And then right with Damien, I feel like is a character that's not talked about enough, because you're completely right. He went from where the hell he was on Arrow, whatever, to being one of my favorite characters on a show. And I hated him for a long time because he killed Laurel. Of course I hate the guy. Yeah. But by, the time, he, even before he left and then came back to that episode, but I love the guy. I was like, God, this guy sucks, and I don't want Sarah to forgive him, but I love this guy.
Yeah, the thing of it is, one of the things that I like the most about Legends is the fact that every season doesn't end with putting an arrow through the eye of the bad guy. It's, they have killed bad guys before, and they've done it as often as not, but they've also brought Astra onto the ship and given Damien a chance to not be the most monstrous character in all of the Arrowverse, and because that's when you brought him in, outside of maybe the Reverse Flash, Damien was the most monstrous, irredeemable person in that entire universe.
Yeah,
there was nothing good about him. He didn't he did have a kid, but you never saw on Arrow that he cared about that daughter. It was just he had a kid, And so to me, it was when you bring him in, he's not a redeemable character. He's not a character you ever want to root for, because all he is this kind of self-important thug who lucked into enormous power and then killed some characters you care about. And so the fact that they were able to make him so compelling, and to make, I still wouldn't quite say redemption, but to make his kind of descent a little softer.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the best little anecdotes that I've gotten so far, talking to some people behind the scenes, was I was talking to Kevin Egan, who wrote or James Egan, sorry, who wrote Mr. Parker's Cul-de-sac, the episode where we finally say goodbye to Damien once and for all.
Yeah.
And in his version of the script, when Damien stuck out his hand to shake Sarah's hand goodbye, she shook his hand. And Katie called and was like, I'm sorry, there's no fucking way.
I absolutely love that, because I wanted to bring that up, because one thing I love about Legends too is that there are things that are black and white, but there's a lot of gray areas they do. And that's what I loved about Damien as well, as, again, I hated this character before.
Yeah.
I was when we first saw him in season 2, I was like, if Sarah doesn't get to kill him, I'm going to lose my mind.
I know. That was my thing too.
And so yeah, it's great to hear Katie, because one thing I really appreciate about Katie as an actress I've heard, from just like you said, behind the scenes stuff, interviews, is that she really seems to know Sarah as a character. One way or the other, she really seems to know that character very well, despite what she may want. And so I'm completely with her, because I remember watching that too. I was like, oh, I do like Damien. He's really fun, but she still should not shake that hand. And so when she, when he still extended that, and she didn't take it, I was like, thank you. And then, because it was really cool after that, because he still walks out and he stabs himself and the sword drops, and she opens the door and she can visibly see something happened, and she can put 2 and 2 together. She's not stupid. She doesn't need all the details. And, it kind of looked like there was almost this confused face, right? Where she's got possibly some concern, worry, even guilt, but it's also still fuck this guy. She played that so well. And so I adore that. So that's so fun to hear, because I agree. I'm glad she asked him to change it. And it sounds like they went along with it, obviously.
Oh yeah. Well, and I will say, when I talked to him and he related that story, at least in his version, it's not like there was any kind of disagreement where it's like, no, but this is important because thematically ... Like as soon as she said it, he's like, yeah, you're right, that's better, basically.
Yeah.
Like, which again, like one of the things that everybody from the actors to the crew to everybody have said about Legends is that part of the reason that it was constantly evolving and part of the reason that it worked so well is because they were open to all kinds of interpretation and all kinds of suggestions. I'm going to tell this story and I don't remember the details, and it probably isn't Legends even, because if I can't remember the details, it could have been anything. But I remember somebody telling a story very recently, so it was probably about Legends, of like something wasn't quite working during a shoot day. Mm-hmm. And somebody called from off to the side and was like, you should do blah, blah, blah. And when they looked, it was like a crew guy who was like changing a light bulb. And he just kind of absent-mindedly was like, no, it's this, that's the fix. And people were like, holy shit, yeah, that's the fix, let's do that thing. And it's like, there's no territoriality, there's no like,
I'm the director, shut up, like you're just lighting. Why is the lighting guy shouting unsolicited recommendations at us? Like, you know, and I've heard that with the Legends set, especially like once they hit season 3 and then they really found their footing more. And especially because I've heard this stuff with, you know, the CW shows being very hard to film, and back in the day, you know, they didn't have the support they needed because they were filming in Vancouver, but they had to listen to LA, and there's a lot of stuff that happened that a lot of people, including Kay Lots, have talked about. But, you know, and again, Kay Lots has said this, and I think a lot of the art cast have mentioned this briefly too, but, you know, they, like you said, they loved working on Legends because they considered everybody's input. You know, it wasn't just like the writers being like, yeah, okay, we'll ask if we need anything, but otherwise just do what we write. You know, they were active. And I remember, I don't know who I heard this from, but I heard that like people, like other people on Arrowverse shows, other shows, they wanted to go to Legends. They were asking, how can we get on that show? How can we get on that set? Because it's also just a great working environment. And it was just like Legends only had that, you know, like the other CW shows, like I love Supergirl, and, you know, Batwoman was fun, Black Lightning and The Flash, and, you know, all these other shows, but I have not heard from any of their shows how great a working environment they've had. Like nothing has compared to what I've heard about Legends. No, for sure. And I think part of that is the ensemble and the fact that, like, I mean, Katie was obviously number 1 on the call sheet, but she wasn't in every single scene the way like Grant and Melissa and Steven were. And so there is an element of like, when you're carrying the whole show on your shoulders, but also you're working every single 18-hour day, like that takes a toll. Like people got really upset when Grant was very open about like, no, this is like, I got another year or 2 and I got to get out of this. Yeah. And they were like, that's disrespectful to the fans and all this kind of stuff. It's like, no, it's because he's 30 years old and he feels 50. Like, yeah. And so, like, I think part of it is just the nature of Legends being an ensemble show. And, like, you don't have, like, Katie was always a positive force. And I'm not saying that Steven and Melissa and Grant weren't. I don't, you know. But I am saying, like, it was, like, Katie and Brandon were always nothing but a refreshing ray of light. And so, like, they weren't constantly exhausted. They weren't desperate to get out of there. And so, like, when, you know, everything I've ever heard about working on a set is that, like, the tone comes from who's at the top of the call sheet. Like, these people who are there 18 hours a day, they set the tone. And if they're exhausted and miserable, then the set is going to be exhausted and miserable. No, that makes a ton of sense. I can't remember her name, but there's this psychologist on Twitter or whatever. She's always, like, tweeting, like, helpful things and stuff. I started following her because I saw a couple things. I was like, you know, that's decent. And she tweeted something a while ago that I was like, oh my God, this explains so much. Is, you know, when people are in survival mode, we can lose empathy, right? So again, that doesn't speak ill to any, you know, actor or anybody at the top of the call sheet that has ever like felt like, oh my God, I gotta get out of here, right? They're not bad people for feeling that. It's not even their fault, but because they feel that way, it does get to everybody else, and everybody else, you know, feels that way. So, I mean, I remember with Supergirl, the last season, they were going to do 7 seasons. And then season 6, Melissa Benoist said, no, this has to be the last one. I can't do anymore, because they were working crazy hours, like working herself to death. And she said, no, like you gotta give me a break, which sucks because if they had a better working environment, we could have had another season.
I also think too, like part of it is like the degree of abuse that your body takes and the lack of sleep and all that kind of stuff. Like it is terrible for a pregnant person.
Oh my,
like
yeah.
And so I can't help but feel, even if she was in talks for that next season, as soon as she was pregnant, she had to know as a mature adult, like, I'm making the choice now of this job or having a healthy child, because like it can't be good for you when you just don't sleep for weeks at a time.
Oh my God. There's absolutely no way on the planet. And I mean, on the one hand, yeah, it stinks. Like I just said, like I would have loved to go another season but again, it's because they didn't have a conducive work environment for that. So, you know, they wrapped up the show at least. Like, I'm happy Supergirl did that.
I'm super excited to see the Girls on the Bus, the HBO show that Melissa.
Yeah, because Melissa's there, and then I think Tala is also on there, right?
Yeah, Tala's there, and it's funny because like when they announced the cast, it was such a big cast that I didn't realize that Tala has a pretty significant role.
Yeah,
and so like. I'm like, oh, we're probably going to get more screen time in like the first 3 episodes of this show where Melissa and Tala share the screen than in the entire time the two of them were in the Arrowverse together.
See, I've been like waiting because, you know, they'll post some behind the scenes pictures, like some stuff comes out with Melissa and all that, but I haven't seen one of her and Tala together yet. And I'm like, come on, guys.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know for a fact, but from what I understand, Tala is going to be playing one of the candidates that the journalists are covering. And so, like, logically, it just, like, that implies that the two are going to share some screen time because, like, it makes sense.
I sure hope so, because that is, I mean, either way, like, even if they're just on the show, I'm still going to watch it because I enjoyed them both separately. But, like, being on screen together, they're going to do just so well. Like,
I'm looking forward to that one quite a bit. And again, like part of that is just because I like both of them. It also sounds genuinely like an entertaining show, and it's something where I can't wait to see some of these people, especially Melissa and Tala, kind of like interacting.
Yeah, and seeing them shine outside of like the CW, because again, I know Tala's done our stuff. Melissa, I mean, Melissa did Glee first, like the poor woman.
I know. Which again,
poor woman,
talk about a show where I've heard the working environment was just exhausting and terrible.
That's a podcaster 200,000. Like that's a whole separate ball game. But I did want to get to some questions because otherwise we are going to talk all night and we are not going to get to some great Twitter peeps questions. I'm going to pull them up here so we can all see them and everybody can be like, wow, that's the one I said. That's so cool. Okay, here we go.
I will say I didn't think about it till just now, but that picture of me that you had up for the longest time. I don't know if you've noticed the jacket that I'm wearing is a Guardians of the Galaxy jacket.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
It's a weird precursor to James Gunn being in the DC universe.
You predicted that without even trying. Congratulations. Yeah, exactly. You're catching up to the Simpsons doing all that stuff. Catching up. Well, we got somebody here, Gianna F, asking what inspired you to create your book, and do you have any favorite moments while working on this project?
What inspired me to create it is kind of like weirdly serpentine. And I know I've said it before on a couple of other podcasts, so I'll try to shorten the story a little bit. But after Josie, I during the production of my first book, I was like, this is great. I'm enjoying this. This is what I want to do. And so I started putting together a Google Doc of other ideas. And one of the ideas that I had was to do an oral history of Crisis on Infinite Earths. And it wasn't just going to be the TV event. It was going to be the comic. It was going to be basically 3 sections, like the Crisis comic from the 80s, and then a middle section that was like the construction of the Arrowverse, and then the third part being the actual Crisis event oral history. And I was excited about that, but I'm exclusive to my day job at comicbook.com, which is owned by Paramount. And so I have to run everything by Paramount HR if I want to do anything that's extracurricular. And they have to determine that like it's not a conflict of interest. And because I cover the Arrowverse, even though I don't think that it would be a conflict of interest, I thought like, this might be a fight. Like they might think it's a conflict of interest. I might have to, So I prepped 2 different pitches, one for a Crisis book and one for an oral history of the movie Hudson Hawk, which unfortunately will now probably never happen because I don't know how you do Hudson Hawk without Bruce Willis, especially now that Danny Aiello has passed away, and Bruce Willis is not in the health situation where he's ever going to be able to do an oral history like that. Yeah. So I think, like, ironically, the window closed on that, but I think it probably was closed before I ever pitched the thing anyway. But anyway, I prepared 2 pitches, and I wanted to do Crisis, and so I handed that one in first, but I had a second one in my back pocket because I was like, if they say no, I'm not going to fight with them for 6 months. I'm just going to move on to the next thing. I have like 30 things on my list, and I like, you know, I'll probably never write all of the things that are on my list right now. So, and so I pitched them on Crisis, and to my surprise, they almost immediately approved it.
Wow.
And so I was like, awesome, I'm writing a book about Crisis. And started writing a book about Crisis. And then George Perez, who was the artist on the comic book, passed away. And so I was like, I'm going to shift into talking about the TV stuff because I don't want to be bothering George's friends and family immediately after he passed.
Right.
And so I was working on the TV stuff, and I was talking to people about Legends because Legends, you know, talking about the construction of the Arrowverse, Legends is one of the shows. And I would talk to them about event series. I'd talk to them about whatever. And one of the things I found was that I was just having so much fun talking to the Legends people that like I would end up talking to them for way longer than I was talking to other people. And I would end up going off on random tangents talking about like Bebo. And so at one point I was listening to the Legends mixtape, and I noticed that a friend of mine, Jess Harnell, is the singing voice of Elvis Presley. And so I messaged Jess, and I was like, hey, would you talk to me for this book I'm writing? And he's like, yeah, sure. And we got on the phone, and he's like, so what's this book? And I was like, actually, I don't have any way of linking your Elvis song to Crisis on Infinite Earths. This doesn't make any sense. But like, I think I've decided that my next book's going to be about this show Legends. And so Jess was like, awesome, let's do it. And then at that point I was like, okay, so I'm going to do a Legends book. And then the show got canceled, and it just became like, why aren't I doing this right now? Like, this was the thing that I was enjoying the most out of the whole Crisis project. Legends got canceled, and suddenly we all wanted new content. We all wanted to talk about Legends all the time. And also, like, honestly, and this is like one of those things, I have to figure out how I'm going to, when I do the Crisis book, which is still happening, it's still on my back burner, but I have to figure out how I'm going to address the Ruby Rose of it all, because she's made all of these allegations, but they were all on like Instagram, and there's no context. And I don't think she will ever talk to me for a Crisis on Infinite Earths book. So it's like, I feel as a journalist that I have to take her allegations seriously, and I have to give them like a little bit of room, at least in the book, just to be like, look, this is all happening in the backdrop, you know. But until her autobiography comes out, I am kind of like, I don't know how. I was struggling with how the hell to handle that thing. Because I didn't want to ignore it. That felt irresponsible, and I didn't want to uncritically report everything she said, because that also felt irresponsible, since so many of her co-stars disputed everything. And
that was what was so weird about that situation. She got all these allegations, and it's like, wow, we should take this seriously, because these are serious. And then you had some people being like, there's absolutely no way that's true. So there's a lot of layers that I don't think a lot of us will get anytime soon to that.
And that's my thing. It's like, as a reporter, if you're going to do this thing, I have one shot to do it right. And so there was just a lot of little things that piled up, and I was just like, what if I put this on the back burner and I do the Legends book, and I spend the next year of my life being happy because I'm talking about Legends?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, and in terms of my favorite moments working on the project, like, I'm still fairly early days in it. Like, I've done maybe 12 interviews, which sounds like a lot, until you consider that, like, I'm taking a shotgun approach and I'm like requesting pretty much everybody. Like today, in spite of the fact that I know the odds of him doing an interview for an unofficial book are basically zero, I did send a message out to Greg Berlanti's people to be like, do you think he'd talk to me for this Legends book?
That'd be really freaking cool, though, because he doesn't really seem to do a lot of interviews or anything, or if he has, I haven't seen him, like, maybe years ago, but...
Yeah, he does the occasional thing with Variety or the Hollywood Reporter, and it's usually, like, long-form profile-y kind of stuff. Like, I remember there was one where he did a photo shoot outside of, like, a New York brownstone, where he and Grant and Melissa were all like in a foot race. But so like, it's one of those things where I reached out to Eric Gow, who played Mr. Parker. I reached out to the woman who played Helen of Troy. It's like,
I love her. I was kind of sad we never got to see Helen of Troy again, like even just to check on Themyscira, which that's a whole other thing too. The fact that, you know, WB basically forbid Legends to use all this stuff, but they got away with Themyscira. Like, they got that approved.
I'll be careful about how I phrase this, because, like, I don't know this to be true, but I have very good reason to believe that was a situation where somebody just said, "Ooh, that's a good idea. It's easier to beg forgiveness than to ask permission." Sure. I kind of get the impression from, like, context clues, just talking to people about related things, that nobody at Warner Brothers or DC approved the Themyscira thing. And they were just like, can't get in trouble if they'd ever said no.
Honestly, that's such a Legends thing to do, though. So, like, sure. I mean, obviously, we don't know how true that is, as you said, but yeah, it was just kind of a funny situation, and I'm glad that they let that slide. Maybe it was one of those things too, where they're like, "We let it slide, but don't do it again." Maybe that's why we never saw it again, because they're like,
very possible. Yeah. But yeah, so I'm like, when I did the Josie book, one of my favorite interviews was with these two young filmmakers named Jennifer and Sylvia Soska. And Jen and Sylv are like grindhouse horror directors now. They do like dark, kinky horror movies. But when they were involved with Josie, it was as 15-year-old extras. And so they shared with me a story about this scene that they remembered like being there when it was shot, but it never ended up in the movie. And when I mentioned it to the directors were like, I don't remember that. And then I mentioned it to one of the actors who was in the scene, and she's like, holy crap, that's right. That was the last scene I was in. That was the end of my character. They totally changed the ending of my character. And so I was just like, that's such a cool, like, it's such a cool random thing for extras to tell you. And also that, like, the actual filmmakers forgot completely that happened. Like, and so, like, and it's funny because later, Deb Kaplan, one of the two directors, sent me like 400 photos of the production, because basically what I discovered was there was no economically feasible way to license photos from the studio. And so I asked, like, do you have any that you own? And they sent me this giant box because they're incredibly generous.
That's awesome.
But in the background of a couple of those photos, I could see things that validated this alternate ending thing. And so I was like, look, that girl, she's in the scene that she's not supposed to be in. The story's true. And so, like, it's early days, and I'm trying to talk to as many people as I possibly can, because you never know where, like, some really cool information is going to come from. But honestly, one of my favorite things so far working on this project is just getting more ingrained and ingratiated into the Legends community, because like, as a direct result of people being like, oh, you're doing a Legends book, like, I ended up in our little auction group, where it's like a Twitter group where when the prop auctions were happening, we all got together, like 20 of us, and we're like, okay, so let's strategically do this so that we're not bidding against one another. And so that everybody can get the one thing they really want, you know?
And
it's just that those auctions happened in December, and that group is still going strong every single day in March, because it's just such a wonderful little group of people, and we enjoy talking with each other and talking about Legends. And every time one of us wears an article of clothing that used to belong to a Legend, we'll take a selfie and send it to the group, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, look at that! Allie's dressed like Ava."
That's just so great to hear. And I think that I honestly really appreciate your timing with this book, because I think it helps keep the fire lit with the fandom, in terms of to continue fighting. Because that's one thing that I've so appreciated with this campaign, with this fandom, is that even after over a year or something, God knows how long it's been, like, we're still fighting. We're still pretty darn loud. And a lot of other fandoms and shows, they get quiet after that long in particular. Like, I mean, so
every show now, because like it was successful with, Veronica Mars and Arrested Development and the Snyder Cut. And so everything that gets canceled now has a fan campaign. Every show that you can think of, if it's over, there's a campaign to bring it back. But like the vast majority of those peter out almost completely a month after the thing ends. And so the fact that Legends is still trending on Twitter twice a week, every week, a year after it's canceled, is a real testament to the level of enthusiasm and engagement that the fan base has for the show.
Oh, 100%. And it especially warms my heart, because the thing I was most afraid of with, Legends ending at any point is because so many other things I watch, like this is a comic channel, and, so a lot of characters I have in the comic books. And Sarah Lance has been in the Arrow 2.5 trade, which I have, and then the Legends comic that came out. But past that, my girl ain't in the comics. I can't go get her in another material like I can with characters like Supergirl and things like that. So that's the thing that breaks my heart the most. It's like one of my favorite characters of all time, and to me, like, the best bi representation I've ever seen, and the best one of the bi characters that got some of the best character development ever on television, 9 years worth, is just gone. Like, I can't get that again. And so it just fills me with such joy that people really feel so similar, and they're fighting. Like, we may not be the largest fan base ever, but we are definitely the most persistent and the loudest, and it's so great.
Well, and also, like, there's a big, like, being persistent and loud, but also being kind and empathetic and respectful. Like, the thing that James Gunn said early on, like, I take it at face value, where he's like, right now I can't be looking backwards. Like, this is a decade of DC having no idea what the hell they're doing in the movies. So, like, it makes sense that his first act can't be like, hey, I'm going to uncancel a bunch of stuff. But at the same time, like, I take him at his word when he's like, trust me, you're being heard. It's in my head. Like, I like the show, and everybody's being super respectful. And, like, I really do think that, like, I take that at face value, and I do think that being respectful is the way to go about this stuff. Like, obviously, I have a really complicated relationship with the whole Snyder Cut thing, because I don't dislike him nearly as much as a lot of people do, but I also don't think that he's my personal messiah. And so, I actually was talking on Twitter the other day. I almost tried to write a book about the production and the disastrous production of the Justice League movie. And I was thinking, I was like, nobody would have been happy with it. Nobody would have liked the book, because, like, I wouldn't have crapped all over Snyder, and I wouldn't have crapped all over the people who came in after him, except for a couple that really deserve it. But, like, I don't think with such a black and white, like, bipolar fighting situation, I don't think I would have made anybody happy with a book that came in and tried to be nuanced.
No, I agree. So, I mean, that stuff, like, that just needs to be let go. Like, if that came out, like, when the Snyder Cut was being announced, it was actually coming out, or even, like, a little bit after it came out, I feel like that would make sense. But doing that now, it's like,
well, that's when I was talking about pitching it. Was it actually, the Snyder Cut had not yet been announced when I was pitching.
Oh, okay.
And then the thing that made me give up on it was that the day Warner Brothers announced, hey, we're actually going to release this thing, a Cinema Blend writer named Sean O'Connell, who by the way has been super supportive of this campaign, so thank you. But Sean announced on Twitter, like, hey, I'm writing this book called Release the Snyder Cut, and it's about like the fan campaign.
There you go.
And it wasn't at all the same book I would have written, because I wanted to try to get into the behind the scenes mayhem and see if I could like get anybody to break an NDA and tell me what really happened. Whereas Sean's was like about the fan campaign and how they kind of magicked this thing into existence by just being loud and angry. But in any event, I still thought it was a niche enough thing that like if Sean was making a book, it didn't make sense for me to also try to make a book at the same time. And so the day that he announced it, I wrote Paramount, and I'm like, never mind, I'm going to do a Josie and the Pussycats book. And I'm so much happier for that, because like now I go on Twitter and I have everybody like tagging me in Josie and the Pussycats nostalgia instead of yelling at me about Zack Snyder.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it sounds like you've honestly made a lot of really smart and enjoyable, decisions to help, which I think is what's about being a journalist too. You can't just go chasing the money or the big headlines, right? Like you still got to do what you enjoy, but do it well.
I especially have to do what I enjoy when it's these books, because again, like I have a day job and I love my day job, but it's arduous. Like I work the news desk. I write between 5 and 8 stories a day, every day, 5 days a week. And it's like, a lot of them are about things that I'm not an expert in. So I have to like stop and do like half an hour of research on the spot so I don't sound like a moron. And so like my day job is not easy, and it's not as fun as you would think that it is covering the geek space. And so like, if I'm going to take time away from playing with my kids to write a book, it has to be something that I'm passionate about, and it has to be something that makes my life better, not worse. Because if I'm going down to my little hidey hole here in my office and sitting in the basement over the weekend and writing something that makes me miserable, I'll never finish it.
Yeah. And it won't be worth it then either. It's just not going to make anything happy. We have Sinif? I'm going to butcher that. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. That's Allie.
Allie. Perfect.
Yeah, perfect. That's the girl who I was just talking about from the auction group.
That's right. Okay, cool. See, I like these things because I feel like I know like Legends fans, like I know some, and now I'm like, I clearly don't know enough. I'm so sorry.
Allie's awesome. Not only is she just a sweet person in general, but she was the one who actually flew to Vancouver and was personally there for the auction. And so when the auction group that I'm part of, when we collectively pooled money and bought the Mr. Parker outfit as a gift for Eric Gao, Allie was the one who went and like took Eric Gao to coffee and presented him the sweater. And it was like our like presentation ceremony of like, thank you for being our Mr. Parker here.
That's so sweet. I love that. Like that's what all this stuff's about, being able to do things like that, not just grabbing stuff for yourself all the time. Of course, get some stuff for yourself if you can, but making sure other people feel appreciated and they get something too.
What I've done is I basically bought a couple of big lots so that I could get a couple of specific things that I wanted. And then all the other stuff is either going to be a premium or a giveaway on the Kickstarter campaign, or it's going to go out to other fans for very, very low prices. Like I was broke my whole 20s. And so like, now that I have the opportunity to sometimes be like, I can splurge and get like a rack of wardrobe. It's like, I'll take the 3 that I want, and the rest of them I'm going to make available to people for like $20.
Yeah, no. And that's so amazing what you do. So Allie is asking, will there be color photos in the book? Because we know there's going to be photos. I think in the campaign you say black and white, but could that be a stretch goal even, or something like, are we getting that color?
I did make that a stretch goal because it was, a couple of things. First of all, I was looking for stretch goals that were doable for under like $10,000. Because like right now, I've got a stretch goal that is, if we can reach 8,500, I'll do an audiobook. And that like, the audiobook kind of helps itself, because once I feel like, okay, I have enough money that I could pay to have this done, like people can also then order the audiobook as an add-on. And so it pays for itself a little bit. but like the color photos were something I did. My budget, actually, the big detailed budget I did at the beginning is based on pricing that includes color photos. And my thought was I would go into it assuming I was going to do black and white because it would save a bunch of money. And then like, if I made enough money in the campaign, I'll just make it color and I'll never tell anybody. And they can be pleasantly surprised. But because I was looking for a doable stretch goal, and B, Allie had asked this on Twitter, I was like, yeah, sure, I'll just make that the thing. Like, I'll blow my quote unquote secret and like tell people that's a thing that's gonna happen.
Yes. So yes, you guys we're gonna get some color, especially if he keeps going the way it's going. Elizabeth, Queen Lizzie, if you don't know her on Twitter, you should. She is absolutely wonderful. But you should also know that she loves Zari 2.0, both the Zaris, but especially Zari 2.0. You seem to have a relatively close contact with Tala. What is your favorite memory with or about her?
The thing that was really fun is I went down to New York to see her show. And to English. I think I said that already in this conversation, but we talked so long off camera, I can't remember. I went to see English, which was phenomenal. Everybody in it was great, and I was close enough that I got to really get a sense for, like, I got to watch kind of the wheels turn a little bit and see kind of some of what Tala was doing in terms of making decisions. But so I went to this show, and it was amazing. And I had gone with a friend, and I needed to use the restroom after the show, and so we broke up. And then I like walked out of the theater, and I had made the conscious decision. Like, I sent Tala a message that was like, hey, break a leg, and a picture of my ticket, but I wasn't going to bother her. Like, she had stuff going on, and so I wasn't gonna like bug her to like, hey, can you come say hi to my friend? Do you want to go get a beer? Blah, 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 blah. I was just like, hey, I'm here to support you. I'll see you later. But I came out of the bathroom and I came out of the theater, and I'm looking for my friend. It's like I look right and there's nobody, and then I look left and like 3 feet away is Tala. And so I went over and went to like give her a hug, and then another person involved with the production, who I can't say who it was because they asked not to talk about it. But another person involved with the production happened to be there to say hi to Tala. And the three of us were like, oh my God, it's you. And so I have a picture of the three of us in my office. And I'm just like, I'm not allowed to share that picture on social media because I've been sworn to secrecy. But it's a treasured moment because it was just like, it was so like organic that we all just kind of bumped into each other. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, I specifically didn't want to bother you, but if you're going to stand here and like offer the hug, then yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, I swear when you were saying, oh, look, Tala's 3 feet away, I heard like 200 Legends fans all like faint, like fall to the floor.
It's funny because like I went and I was there to support Tala, but like I was not especially conspicuous. Ironically, I was wearing a flannel, which somebody else commented on, but it was like, no, I just wear flannels all the time. But when I was like in the restroom, I like walked out, and then there was a guy walking past me with a Praise Bebo t-shirt and stuff like that. So it's like,
so cool.
There were definitely Legends fans like in the bleachers around me, even beyond like just me being there. And so I do know there, like by the time we were done and like the three of us were there, and we weren't especially well hidden, like we were actually on the sidewalk talking. And so like by the time we were done with our little conversation, we were all like, time to go get a drink, because very soon we're going to have these 5 people who are waiting for Tala's autograph figure out that the other 2 of us are people.
Yep, they're going to come through. Well, that's cool though, because I have not been anywhere yet where I can just like bump into Legends fans. Like I haven't met another like real life Legends person in like person yet. So I'm like, I'm so excited to hear that. And it's cool that Legends fans like still, I mean, of course they keep up with Tala, but it's cool that some are actually able to like physically go there and still show support just like you did.
I'm a little bummed. Later this month, Allie from the last question and Lizzie from this question are going to see Tala in a play in New York. And they like sent me a thing the other day, like, hey, do you want to go? and I can't just because the particular day that they're going is my daughter's birthday party. Like, not her actual birthday, but the party. And I'm just like, there's just no way around it. Like, even if I went, like, even if we moved the birthday party to the next day, then I would go and I would be exhausted when I came back from New York at 1 a.m. And so there's just no way around it, which is a bummer, because I was just like, man, that'd be really great. Like, last time I went, the folks I went with were just friends of mine. They weren't especially invested in Tala. And so it would have been really fun to go with Lizzie and Allie, but it's just like timing wise, it's like you picked the one day that I couldn't do it.
It'd be cool, like, just to see, if Legends could get, some people to, like, even just once a year meet up and physically support like some Legends cast member. That would be really fun.
There are people doing Rotom is doing a crowdfunding thing to help some fans who can't afford to go to Legends Con, like, make it a doable thing, and that's really cool. And I'm really excited to see that kind of stuff. I'm still on the fence about whether I can make that one happen economically. It's like, I shouldn't spend a bunch of money, but at the same time, like, I'll have a book to sell by then.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be pretty cool. But yeah, like, I mean, I bought the ticket because it's like $100-something. So, like, even if I can't go, the worst thing is, I mean, that still sucks, but it's not like life or death. So I bought the ticket and I was really excited. But now I'm kind of like, I don't know if I'll be able to spend the $3,000 to $5,000 it's gonna take for me to get there either. Like, that's not looking great. But yeah, I'm still excited. I'm really glad people are crowdfunding and supporting each other. It's really awesome. Cool. Well, we got one more here. Why is the cover of your last book so amazing and handsome? So obviously, referring to Josie, I assume.
No, so as a stretch goal for Josie, I actually I collected a bunch of my old columns. I used to do a column first at Comic Related and then at Newsarama called The Gold Exchange, which was every month when the Booster Gold comic came out, I would do like a director's commentary style interview with whoever was writing the book at the time. And for a long time, it was Dan Jurgens who created the character, and then there was Mark DeMatteis for a little while. And but Comic Related went out of business, and Newsarama has changed hands 7 times. And so none of those columns are on the internet anymore. And so for a long time, people would ask me, like, hey, is there any way I can still read The Gold Exchange? And I kept saying, like, one of these days I'm going to put together an ebook. And so finally, like, to force myself to actually do it, when I was crowdfunding Josie as a stretch goal, I was like, hey, if we get to $5,000, I'll finally get off my butt and make The Gold Exchange. And so I made The Gold Exchange and I put it out as a paperback. And when the word came out that Booster was going to be on Legends, I came up with this idea that somebody should take like The Gold Exchange and condense it way down and then provide new intros with context. So instead of being a director's commentary, it was like a guide to Booster Gold. And that way people who were encountering him for the first time on Legends would be able to read this book and be like, oh, that's who this guy is. That's his deal. And so I reached out to Kevin Allen, which is who this guy is, Mr. Chaos. And he's a friend of mine who does a lot of fan fiction. And so I've seen his writing. I know it's pretty sharp. And I figured I wouldn't need to edit him too very much. And so I was just like, hey, would you be willing to do like the director's or like the Reader's Digest condensed version of The Gold Exchange? And like, you get first billing and I'll give you, 50% of everything I make off of it on Amazon. And he was like, yeah, definitely. Let's do that. And so there's a book out there now called A Legend in His Own Time, which is a quick and dirty guide to Booster Gold, basically, that you can get for $7.99 on Amazon in paperback. And it's Kevin doing all of the heavy lifting of making The Gold Exchange kind of shorter and more palatable to like everyday people who don't have the comics sitting in front of them.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's really helpful because a lot of people, including myself, like, I don't know Booster Gold that well. Like, I know he's a character, and I was still excited to see them bring him to Legends, but it's also like, I couldn't tell you really much about him. Yeah,
there's a lot of things that intersect for me to fall in love with Booster Gold so much. Because I really like the Giffen DeMatteis Justice League in the 80s. My favorite comic book artist like ever is Dan Jurgens, who created Booster. And Dan and I, when I was at Wizard 20 years ago, became friends and remain friends. In fact, he just yesterday sent me a really beautiful signed and remarked Booster Gold hardcover as a birthday present. And so there's all these things where it's like, oh no, you're going to be into Booster Gold. And then like when the series came out, there was a volume of Booster that came out in 2007. And it was written by Jeff Johns and Jeff Katz, and Dan Jurgens drew it. And at the time I was working at Comic Related, and we had this thing called Hot Shot of the Week, where each of the critics would pick their favorite book of the week, basically.
Okay.
And Booster was so good that every single week that it was out, I never wrote about any other books. And so after like 3 times of that, I just asked Johns and Katz and Jurgens, like, would you guys just do a Booster Gold column with me so that like I can talk about something else? and so they were all game to do it. And I'm very happy that I was finally forced to put that whole thing together. And then because I just can't help myself, I also did a bunch of like new interviews for the book, including like I included an interview with Phil Klemmer talking about the like Booster coming to TV. And I did an interview with Tom King, who's the guy who wrote the Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow story that's going to be the movie. And because he wrote a couple of stories featuring Booster Gold that were like best-selling but also super controversial, and so I got to talk to him about all that stuff. And so I couldn't help myself. The simplest project ever, where I was supposed to just cut and paste my old columns and sell it, I could not do that. I couldn't bring myself to just do the easy thing one time, and so I had to completely reformat everything and write all new introductions and then do a bunch of new interviews and all this kind of crap, and it was insane and it took way too long. But so I call the Legends book 2, because as far as I'm concerned, Time to Be Heroes is the second actual book that I've written. But right now you can go get the Gold Exchange, you can get A Legend in His Own Time, and you can get this thing called Dispatches from Chicago, which is actually just copy pasted of my commentary track style interviews with Eric Larson for his comic Savage Dragon.
Nice. Very cool. Yeah, Savage Dragon's huge.
I love Savage Dragon. It's one of my favorite books. And I will say I've been slowly but surely writing new introductions for all of those. So soon enough, the version of Dispatches from Chicago that exists as an ebook on Amazon will be replaced by a newer, shinier version that I'm actually proud of. Whereas the one that exists now basically just exists because all of the stuff from before I worked at Comic Book is not available on the internet. So I copy pasted it into a PDF and made it available to people for 99 cents.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's great. And honestly, the fact that you could have just copy pasted, the Booster Gold thing and, Stella, but you put more into like, it shows how much you love it. And, really just shows the diligence you are as a journalist. So that's awesome.
It's really, it's a combination of like, I don't want my name on something if I wouldn't want to own it myself. Which is also kind of how it's the ethos that makes the Legends book and the Josie book happen. It's like, I want to read this thing, but it doesn't exist because nobody except me is crazy enough to spend a year of their life on it. So therefore, it's incumbent on me to make it so that I can read it.
No, that absolutely, no, that makes so much sense. And it's really cool that you're specifically into a lot of things that, like you said, it may not be as like big general public all the time. But you find you bring the fans out. Honestly, I think you really help, nourish a voice and help people realize, oh my God, there are people that like this, like me. Hell yeah. Like
that's one of the best things about doing these kind of niche cult things is like being able to create something for people who are underserved. Like, I did Josie fairly straightforward, like journalism style. I'm being a lot more freewheeling in terms of my language and my structure on the Legends book because it's Legends and I feel like you can do that. And part of that is, I want people who are missing Legends to feel like this book is a piece of Legends content. I'm never going to say that I'm like good enough that I would have been a writer on the show or whatever, but I want this book to feel like, no, this belongs kind of on the shelf next to the DVDs. Like this feels Legendsy. I want, and by doing that, I feel like I'll help a little bit with the people who feel like I haven't had new content in a year and I really am frustrated and I want something. It's like, well, not only am I trying to do it a little bit, but also because of the nature of the oral history, a lot of the book isn't even me. It's like in the words of the creators and it's letting them speak for themselves.
Yeah, no, I completely love that. And speaking of things that you want, Kevin's original question here, you are allowed 10 minutes alone on set, and assuming that you can grab something and not be punished for it later, what would you grab as a souvenir?
And it's always so hard to say because, like, I think the obvious answer is Bebo. I love like props and original art from comics. Like, there's something to me that's really appealing about like having a real physical tactile thing where you could say like, I have this piece of something that's important to me. Like, my favorite comic of all time is this book called Strangers in Paradise. And it ran for like 120 issues ish. And so it's like 120 issues times 20 pages. There's like 3,000 pages of original art that exist in the world from this book. And so the fact that I have a page of Strangers in Paradise, I'm just like, that's really special to me because like it's a piece of this thing that means a lot to me. Before we were on mic, I was talking about how one of the lots of props that I bought it because it had one of the Zari flannels from Here I Go Again. So and that's one of my favorite episodes of television ever. And so I have like this key piece of wardrobe from this, wonderful piece of TV. And so it's hard to know what I would grab outside of like the big obvious things that anybody would take. Like, I feel like if Bebo wasn't sitting there and easily stealable, it might end up being something like that you can put on the mantle and that's easily identifiable in a conversation piece. Like the Atom helmet or the Jonah Hex Wanted poster that hung in Rip's lab. Because like, to an extent, like when I have like props hanging in the office, like part of it is like the flannel. If you know that show, it's like that's instantly recognizable, and you can look at that little shadow backs and be like, "Is that the real one?" And it is one of them. It's one of those things where it's like there's doubles and there's stunt ones and there's blah blah blah. But it's like this was used in production of this episode, and so like it's the same thing with like if somebody were to walk in here and look on the mantle and it's like, is that the Adams helmet? How the hell do you have that?
Yeah.
And those are the ones that come immediately to mind because they're so immediately distinctive. Is things like the totems, Adams helmet, Bebo. And then I'm sure like if I was actually on set, there would be certain things. Actually, you know what? I'll give you a really good answer that probably most people wouldn't say because there's context to it. The dais, the little table that Gideon's head pops out of, like the little octagon table that they all gather around.
Yeah.
I would totally take that. I'm actually...
that'd be really cool.
My father-in-law is like an incredible woodworker. And so I've been trying to learn some of those skills and like go into the wood shop and mess around. And I'm designing a version of that table, which won't be metal, obviously, it'll be wood. But like, I want to make myself a version of that table where it's like, it's a elevated coffee table with places to stick devices. So you can like, okay, there's a slot here. You can sit there and play on your iPad while it's charging. But also it looks like the Gideon table from Legends. So
that would be really, really cool.
That's one I can say that probably most people wouldn't say is I would steal the Gideon table and just like have the real one instead of the
just see you like ripping it out yourself and trying to lug it out. They're like, "Where's the carts?"
But yeah, so like it's one of those things. There's a million answers because of course, like you watch any given episode and you're like, oh man, that'd be a cool thing to have. But I have a lot of like cool little things already. I have a pile of the VHS tapes from Mr. Parker's Cul-de-sac,
right?
And stuff like that, where I'm just like, this is already a cool, weird little thing. Like I feel like if I was gonna steal something, I'd have to steal something that was like immediately identifiable.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. That's very much like I would want to steal something relating to Sarah specifically, but that's because I'm just such a diehard fan.
I feel like maybe that's part of it too. Is that like a lot of my favorite characters are the characters who don't spend very much time in costume. Like I love Zari and I love Astra, and it's like so there's no obvious go-to like, well, I'd steal that costume because like. Yeah. It got used one time for 4 seconds. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. No, that's very true. I mean, with Astra, like just those red boots she wore.
Yeah.
And when I said I would like want those boots. I could never wear them. They never fit. They break my feet. But like again, that would be a staple to me of like if you're a Legends fan, you're like, holy shit, those are those boots.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if you're not the biggest Astra fan, you're gonna be like, oh shit, like.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the same kind of it's like, and you know what else would be a cool thing that you could get and like a lot of people could have is the soul tokens, the soul coins.
Yeah, that would be a really cool one to kind of throw out there to people. I feel like that's the thing too is, everybody, we all want the really big props, of course, and things like that, but having something that everybody can have a piece of, and especially in a fandom where we're all so community oriented and so positive, like much more than other fandoms. Everybody talks about like, I love my fandom, and I'm in like a gazillion, it feels like always, because I enjoy so many things, but like the Legends fandom really is so significantly different. I'm not even talking about me, like literally everyone else is just absolutely phenomenal.
No, I feel the same way. I feel like, and again, like I had that same thing with Josie. I've been very, very lucky that I've chosen to commit big chunks of my life to things where the people around it are full of positivity and light, and like I'm embraced, and I don't have to spend my whole day fighting with people on social media about whether or not this 5% was wrong.
True. No, I completely hear you there. And if you look, the campaign has done more while we've been talking.
We lost our 666.
But we're gonna go up to 766. It's fine. We'll catch up, guys. And we'll catch up. Well, thank you so much, Russ, for coming on. Thank you for chatting with me for so long today. I again feel like we could talk for days, but
trust me, I am a talker. I worked at a video store for a long time, and like my current wife met me, and she was a customer who I used to walk around, and I kid you not, I was not flirting with her, but because like I never shut the hell up, she thought I was.
Oh, poor thing.
So she developed a crush on me, and like that years later when I finally figured out like, oh, I should date that person, I had to like talk her into it because she thought that I had like intentionally misled her back then.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, that honestly sounds like kind of like a funny Legends episode.
Oh, yeah, and it's adorable now because like we got a happy ending, but it's just one of those things where I'm like, she would tell me that later, and I'm like, I had no idea. I'm just so oblivious. It's like I never shut the hell up, and like because apparently she had a crush on me, she let me keep talking, and so I was just like, oh, cool, we're hanging out.
Oh my goodness. Well, again, thank you for coming on, Russ. It's so great to chat with you. Those of you that are watching this now, obviously, if you somehow have no way, you can back the Kickstarter. I'll make sure the link's in the description so you can click like 5 times, and you're backing an awesome campaign. And he's consistently updating it with like new props and stretch goals, as you guys have probably heard, which is really, really amazing. Russ, plug yourself away.
Piece those out because like with the Josie one, I had a lot of props and they were gone on like day 3.
Oh, wow.
For the whole rest of the campaign, people were just like, hey, do you have any more headphones? Hey, do you have any more? And I'm just like, no, man, I'm sorry. I put like all 10 of them up on the first day and they all went. And so now I'm just like, I'm trying to roll something new out every few days. And so that like somebody new who missed the beer labels or the Bebo fur, you can have a chance to get like the little gold leaf things that Julius Caesar and his men wore, or whatever.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think that's really smart, and I think people are responding to it because you're seeing it keeps getting more backers daily, which is really cool because there are Kickstarter campaigns that don't see that. That's not always the norm.
I mean, for the Josie book, I did it on Indiegogo and I did pretty well there. But then at the recommendation of a friend of mine, I went to Kickstarter for the audiobook. And it was like, we hit our goal, which was $750. And then immediately just stopped. It was like, once people were like, oh, it's going to exist. Great. I'll get it on Audible.
Yeah. That's the thing too. Like doing a Kickstarter, doing campaigns, people are like, well, it's about the product you put on. It's like, that's a part of it. But so much of it is also just how you run the campaign, how you roll things out, when you roll them out, what you like, there's so much to it. So yeah, full props to you. Plug yourself away, man. Like, where can people find you? All that good stuff.
I mean, I'm on virtually every social media as just Russ Burlingame. It's RussBurlingame. The only one that is different is Instagram, because as soon as I got verified on Twitter, somebody jumped on Instagram and stole that name. And so on Instagram, there's a period between Russ and Burlingame. You can tell that it's not, and I don't feel bad at all saying that, because like you can tell that it's somebody who's camping, because if you look at their bio, it's like if an AI tried to recreate my Twitter bio, it's like got my wife's and kids' names in it.
Ew. God.
And so, yeah, I'm just like, no, I don't feel bad at all. And I've tried like 6 times to get Instagram to delete it because they've never posted anything. So clearly they're just looking for me to like offer to buy the thing, which is not going to happen.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Russ Burlingame. And then if you want to pick up the Josie book or the Gold Exchange, you can get as an add-on in the Legends of Tomorrow Kickstarter. But if you want to get the Josie book, or if you want to get the Gold Exchange separate from the Legends book, you can do either on Amazon, or you can get signed copies at josiebook.com. That store theoretically is going to go down for change soon, but I haven't gotten around to doing that yet. So the books are still on sale.
Perfect. Well, you guys, I'll make sure all those links are below because I don't remember things either. And you can just clicky. Again, back the Kickstarter. Please share it. Even if you can't back it, it makes a huge difference. Thank you again, Russ, so much for your time. You're doing so many great things.
Yeah, it's great getting to actually chat because we talk online all the time.
We do, yeah. That's kind of the thing. I feel like that's also kind of a Legends thing. It's like we can all feel so close, but we never actually get to talk face to face or in person or what have you. Yeah,
for sure. And now I'm gonna go and put my son in bed because I don't know if you know, but he's waiting.
Woo, man! Those kids, they will get you too. Just like Sarah and Ava will find out eventually when we get the movie and or the next season. So exactly. It's going to happen. But yeah, thank you, Nerdy Neighbor, so much for watching. Check out Russ, follow him, keep up. He's always still doing legend stuff, and 2000 are great things. And we'll see you guys next time in the Nerdy Neighborhood.